it does help. I have seen in my own state, I come from a state of Assam, as you know, where there is the largest number of insurgency groups. Today, we have not been able to get rid of it, but it has been contained to a great extent. How it has been able to contain it? Because we have been able to provide better roads, better medical facilities, better employment. So unless we provide better facilities, better livelihood, and see that they are not deprived of their due share, dignity of a human being, you see, their own culture, their identity, that is also very important. Everybody proud his own language, proud his their own culture also. So sometimes, you see, we ignore their culture, identity of a smaller section of the people. That is a problem also. So now, unless you involve all sections of the people, involvement of all sections of the people in all the process, that is, I do feel that we have to involve all sections of the people. And education doesn't mean that whatever we receive from the schools or the books, you can get a lot of education from the people whom we don't consider to be educated people. That education is also very important. I have seen in my own life. You see, we meet a lot of people, we don't feel that they are very, but a lot of things we learn from those people also. So I don't know exactly the solution. Frankly speaking, you ask me, what is the solution? Solution is, of course, I do feel, but it can be a static one also. You have to go on changing economy. And the world is changing, technology is changing. Education also has to be go on changing also, according to me also. Today it has been changing also, no doubt about it, you see. And of course, we have to study how the other countries have developed. Then you can't follow totally also. As Patel rightly mentioned, you can't have a Oxford or MIT or Stanford or any other university. But there are certain things we have to also, not that we can throw them away everything, you see. But it has to be combination of our local conditions, our natural resources, human resource. We are writing, talking about spirituality also. Then of course, economic is number one. Whatever, you see, ultimately is why education? So that we can lead a better life, well-being of the people, so that we get necessary of our life whenever we fall ill, so that we can provide the treatment also, good housing, good other facilities. This is also one of the reasons, no doubt about it. So now we have been trying our level best to provide skill. You have been also talking about, I have seen the purpose of use that you have, the PANIIT, they want to establish even the Gurukul, skill Gurukuls in the rural areas. It's a good idea. It's a very good idea I have seen here also. So that the deprived section also, marginal section also. Because we have to be sensitive to our own brethren. We can look after ourselves. I don't bother about, definitely we can provide a good education to my children, to everybody. But we have to see those who are marginalized or the backward or scheduled castes or scheduled tribes, but deprived section of the society also. So our whole idea is, even in the Constitution of India, to provide, we talk about justice, social, economic, and political. So we have to give justice to everybody. And that gives justice, we have to provide the right type of education, no doubt. Today still, you see, we are far behind in case of education, no doubt about it. The one advantage, of course, we have the countries also. You have got the natural resources, human resources, but how to utilize our human resources, how to provide the right type of education. There's no doubt about it. And I saw yesterday the American ambassador talk about what they call the community colleges. I also visited 2-3 times to America to the community college. But that idea is good. I do also feel, because now I was told about a few days back by one of the embassy fellow that in this recession, these community colleges, the boys, they are getting jobs and everything. Those who are coming out of the community colleges. That concept also I have been propagating, not exactly one, which is relevant for my state, for example. You see, for our local problem, for handicap, for dairy, even for medical, other facilities also. So we have been talking about the indigenous system of medicine also. Because I have seen also, now the cost of medicine is so high, the poor people cannot afford also. So in India, we have to go for just whether medicine or many other things, which is affordable to the common man. That is the job of your IITs or other top scientists or everybody else. But that way, we are capable. I must say, that way, Indian people are capable, and we have got the best of brains, no doubt about it. And today I like to pay my homage to Pandit Nehruji and Bidhan Chandra Rai also for had such a vision, a really visionary leader, to have such a Kharagpur, such an institute of excellence, no doubt about it. Today, of course, no doubt, the IITs has been doing very well. You are the best brain of the whole country also. Society has given to something. Now you are very happy that you have also decided to give back to the society also. Your whole idea to nation building, no doubt, sustainable economic growth, and to look after the poor and downtrodden is really very, very laudable also. I like to thank all of you for taking so much of initiative and for inviting me to address the conference. I hope this global conference will go a long way, and going a long way to not only our solving of the problem through proper education, so that the country will make much toward achieving the. Today, of course, undoubtedly, we are emerging as a third economic power. We want not only to economic power, socially and other humanly, and every respect, even for the well-being of the people. That's why we've been talking about inclusive growth, not only the GDP growth. You see, supposing we may have millions of, or we may have a GDP may be very high, but if there are large number of remain poor, that type of society we don't want. We want a society where inequality will be less. For example, even in India, we have seen this new system, capitalist system, leads to more inequality. In America also, even China also I have seen. So it will lead unrest among the people. So that will not bring peace or sustainable development. Temporary it may be, in the long run it won't be sustained. So that's why since we've been talking about sustainable development, definitely we have to find out the ways where will lead to a sustainable economic development. With these words, I wish you all success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gogoi. From his perspective, we obviously wanted to share his experiences of problem solving, but there are two important points that he made which I want to highlight among the many that he made. One is that education is not a one-way process. You can even learn, be educated from people we normally consider to be uneducated. And the sense of involvement. If there isn't a sense of involvement in the education process, you can not take it anywhere, and that doesn't lead to any kind of problem solving at all. May I please ask Daniela to make her presentation. She has a presentation, and she promises that it will be short.
Great, thank you. Good morning. Thank you to the PANIIT alumni for hosting this very interesting event and for the invitation to speak with all of you today. Thank you to Dr. Mukherjee and the distinguished panelists that I join here today. I've really observed at this conference the impressive leadership of IIT graduates and the contribution they're making to India's economic growth and development. I won't be speaking today about India's unique context. This is a group far more qualified than I to do so. But about examples from a variety of contexts that demonstrate the potential of pragmatic and data-driven policy to pave the way to sustain development outcomes. I think I'll keep my remarks relatively brief, but I think they'll touch on some of the themes you heard from the earlier panelists this morning. The call for data-driven policy is not new. For instance, Calcutta's own Abhijit Banerjee co-leads MIT's Poverty Action Lab that is devoted to data-driven analysis of development interventions. But big data and the broader revolution in data that we are experiencing is creating, we may indeed be entering a new frontier with numerous opportunities for data to inform policy. I realize that I'm speaking to a like-minded audience here. Many of you have spent your careers using data-driven approaches in business, government, the social sectors. So I hope my remarks will reinforce your efforts. So the first question is why pragmatic and data-driven approaches to policymaking? In a rapidly changing world, data-driven policymaking allows us to respond to changing information. It avoids one-size-fits-all approaches. It can use advances in data and technology and can bring diverse stakeholders to the table around objective information in areas that may be controversial otherwise. I emphasize both pragmatic and data-driven because, one without the other can lead us either to elegant solutions with no hope of implementation or practical compromises that have little hope for long-term impact. India already is undoubtedly at the forefront of some of these efforts, and I think you've heard about some of them at the conference. In the U.S., we are increasingly seeking out these approaches in our own domestic policymaking and in our global development partnerships. President Obama's Global Development Policy Directive emphasizes data-driven approaches, and it's central to my role at the State Department. And personally, I really just like data and its power to reveal insights and change our perceptions. And my own background, holding engineering degrees, business degrees, and public policy degrees, have led me to seek out ways that those pieces are being brought together. So I'll give you 3 quick examples. The first is an approach to analyzing and prioritizing barriers to economic growth, and that's called the constraints to growth analysis. It's an analytical approach that was developed at Harvard by Professors Hausman, Roderick, and Velasco. What's interesting about this approach is that it provides an analytical framework to not only identify the barriers to economic growth, but prioritize them, and therefore enabling policymakers to pragmatically select a couple of key interventions to focus on to drive economic growth. Many countries are now using this tool. The U.S. government's own Millennium Challenge Corporation and Partnership for Growth use it as a foundational tool for its collaborations in countries from the Philippines to Tanzania. It also provides the basis for a process that engages multiple stakeholders to objectively and transparently identify priorities for public and private investment. While it's a robust analysis, there are, of course, many limitations, but we found it extremely valuable as a starting point for a dialogue and policymaking around economic growth. The second one speaks directly to education, and it's a bit of a brief story about how pragmatism in data is playing an important role in addressing education challenges in the U.S. And that's the story of Teach for America. Teach for America was created by a social entrepreneur in the 1990s who recognized America's education challenges, and she had a pragmatic solution: recruit students from top universities for a 2-year fellowship to teach in some of the most challenged schools in the U.S. Today, you may be familiar with this model because Teach for America is also now in India as Teach for India, and has attracted students from leading Indian universities. In the U.S., we have seen TFA become a top recruiter at Ivy League college campuses, competing with banking and consulting. What is interesting is to see how this pragmatic approach has also led to or contributed to data-driven policy change in the U.S. What we saw happen is that Teach for America teachers, after experience within struggling schools, recognized that U.S. education models and policies needed innovation and change. They have become leaders in seeking new education models in public school systems, and they also go to Washington and state capitals to influence policy. In part because of the new influx of people and ideas that Teach for America alumni helped create, we see a dramatic increase in the use of data in analyzing performance and trade-offs in education policy decisions and practices, ranging from pedagogy to teacher quality. This is not uncontroversial, and many debates continue within the U.S. on the best approaches to education. But this effort has exposed and challenged many long-held assumptions, transformed the dialogue, and brought new talent and data to the equation. The third one I'll just touch on is the power of open data and big data to understand the needs and of citizens and inform citizens. Businesses today collect incredible amounts of data on customers to enable them to reach customers and tailor products and services to their needs. The same revolution is occurring in understanding the needs of citizens, although few have achieved scale. At the same time, the availability of data on government activities, expenditures, and performance is revolutionizing the role of citizens in governance. The examples are numerous and diverse. I'll highlight a couple from several different fields. In health, for instance, we used to have to wait years for epidemiological data. Today, there's mobile applications like EpiSurveyor, which allow rapid mobile-based health surveillance. This results in the potential for more rapid and responsive health policies and interventions. The second I'll highlight is what's called the Open Government Platform. It's actually a collaboration between the U.S. and Indian governments, which has created an open source platform for citizens to access a wide range of government data. This is now being used by both the Indian governments. The U.S. has a similar platform built off of the collaboration, and this same platform is now being considered for uptake in countries from Ghana to Canada. The third example here I'll highlight is the UN Global Pulse Initiative, which is working with governments across the globe to use big data from mobile phones and the internet to identify everything from impending food price increases and economic downturns to rapidly identifying needs during humanitarian crises. So this is all to say the potential is enormous, and I'm sure that many of the applications developed by those of you in the technology sector could provide further ideas and innovation. But to make these meaningful, the best models will need both public and private resources for scale-up, and the data collected will need to be used by policymakers and reported to the public. The U.S. government's newly launched Millennium Alliance initiative aims to support some of these type efforts. It is a public-private partnership in India that is working to help bring Indian development innovations to scale in health, agriculture, clean energy, and education, and share those innovations with developing countries across the globe. So in conclusion, policy informed by pragmatism and data has many benefits. It can bring together multiple disciplines and perspectives, pairing the skills of policymakers with technology leaders, market strategists, economists, bankers. It can enable understanding it enables us to understand the needs of and get us closer to the ultimate customer of policy reforms. And it has the potential to be the basis for a process that builds consensus around policy change amongst diverse stakeholders. Across the globe, in countries of various stages of development, data-driven approaches are being embraced. India undoubtedly can be at the forefront of these efforts, and IIT graduates can play an essential role. Thank you.
Thank you. How pragmatism can form a bridge between education and policy making. A more macro view than what we've had so far from the previous two speakers. The last speaker, and certainly not the least, Mr. Muthuraman.
Good morning to all of you. It's always a great pleasure to be with the fellow IITians, and here is another opportunity for me. On education, I want to deal with some very fundamental issues. We need to ask ourselves first as to what is the purpose of education. In my view, there are three purposes. There are three fundamental purposes of education. One is, of course, to gather knowledge. Knowledge about many things, about the world, about the environment, about the society, about the subjects, that whether it is chemistry, mathematics, history, mechanical engineering, metallurgy. So there is an aspect of education which deals with gathering of knowledge. The second reason, the second purpose of education is to develop in people some very fundamental traits in order for them to deal with the world. Like, for example, the ability to analyze things, the ability to have passion to perform, the ability to have fire in the belly, the ability to manage people or lead people, the ability to handle successes, or the ability to handle failures and disappointments. Because however much knowledge you have, that knowledge has to be translated into something in the world. And nobody can do it without some of these or many of these fundamental traits. So that is the second purpose of education. But the third purpose of education, which I believe is the most important purpose, is to create in people an ability to think, an ability to imagine, an ability to create and innovate, which is the most important part of education. If I were to give weightage to these three aspects of gathering knowledge, developing fundamental traits, and creating an ability to think and innovate and create, I would give about 20% to gathering of knowledge. I would give maybe about 30 or 35% to creating these fundamental traits in human beings. Spend time in listening to faculty. Fortunately, you will have good faculty, hopefully. Of the three fundamental purposes of education, gathering of knowledge is the easiest thing. And it happens. And we are doing a reasonable job of it. The second one, which is developing of traits in people, like I said, the passion to perform, to create a fire in the belly to an outstanding performance, achievements, or ability to take disappointments and failures. Many of these fundamental traits, we are not doing well. They don't come from reading books. They don't come from listening to chemistry or metallurgy or mechanical engineering. They come from many other activities that a student undergoes in his career, or many of us undergo even in our life, like sports, like music, like meditation, like many extracurricular activities, many of which are not associated with the left brain gathering of knowledge, but a lot to do with the right brain, tickling the right brain. But these are extremely important part of education. The third part of fundamental purpose of education is to, and we are not doing well on this. In fact, these days I see a lot of crime, whether, starting from elementary school, books and books and books and homeworks and homeworks and homeworks and classes and classes and classes and marks and marks and marks. There is no time and there is no space and there is no inclination to develop these, nor we think that these traits, somehow we seem to think that these traits will automatically come to people from somewhere. And we don't tickle the right part of the brain to ensure that we have a program of at least, initiating people into thinking about how to develop these traits. The third part of fundamental purpose of education is to create an ability in people to think and imagine and to create and innovate. This is the most difficult part of. And this does not come again from books. This does not come from just listening to physics and metallurgy and mathematics. This perhaps, I don't even know how it comes, but this perhaps comes, but I do know that this is important for human beings, because the purpose of life, the purpose of human beings' life is to create something. The creation of something cannot happen entirely by having knowledge of the past. It has an innate ability, and it doesn't have to do with formal education. You'll find lots of people in villages who have never been to school, the point that the Chief Minister made, or innovative people, or very creative people. So there is something that happens in a student life that makes that person creative. So this perhaps comes from giving space and time to students. Probably it comes from an action, reflection, action cycle. It comes from a lot of introspection. Any education system, irrespective of the level of the education, we have school and we have college and we have our own administrative, shall we say, mechanisms of calling something as school and calling something as college and university and so on. Irrespective of what it is, you need to design an education system which has all the three elements. If we don't have it, then we are leaving and have only the knowledge part of it. We used to have. Many, many years ago in India, I think we had a very good education system, which like the Gurukuls and, people assembling under a guru and so on, and I don't want to deal with it, and many of us are aware of it. But today we have many other advantages. We have tremendous amount of communication. We have IT systems. We have the networking. We have tremendously advanced in technology. But we seem to have forgotten how to impart fundamental traits in boys and girls, how to impart that creativity in mind, or how to impart an ability to think. Those are the more important traits than knowledge. So all that I wanted to communicate, a simple message, is that we need to look at the education system. It is not creating more IITs. It is not creating more engineering colleges. It is not all that. It is to do doing some fundamental thinking about what is the purpose of education and design a system in which you have all three components and giving an appropriate weightage to the component of creating an ability to think and creating some fundamental traits in the boys and girls. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Muthuraman. That was wonderful. If I could rephrase the purpose of education, which Mr. Muthuraman so lucidly spelled out, education is about opening up a few windows and doors of the mind, because only through that opening up of the mind, fearlessly and without prejudice, can you meet the three principal goals of the ability to think, the ability to imagine, the ability to innovate. This ties up with something that Partha Ghosh raised at the very beginning of this panel discussion. Can one, and this is the question I want to leave, can one open up the doors and windows of the mind from something that is only homegrown? My feeling is that the Republic of Letters, the Republic of Education and Learning, unlike the political republic, knows no borders and boundaries. We have to find a mechanism where we can embrace what is out there outside of India without sacrificing, without compromising some of the fundamental strengths of our own society, of our own literature, of our own culture, of our own education. There is no blueprint for doing this, but it cannot be done without greater involvement, greater participation from those of us, like you, like everybody on this dais, who have had the privilege of having a sound and good education. We are the privileged. We need to give back something to the country that has given us these privileges. I think that is the message that's coming out from this dais this morning. Thank you so much.